think everybody's waiting for. Good morning. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, August 23rd, excuse me. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I'm the chair of this committee. With me at the dais are Councilmember Ellison, Councilmember Reich, and Councilmember Gordon. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We have 7 items on today's agenda, and we'll begin with the consent agenda. Items 1 and 2 are referring to staff 2 ordinances introduced at council last week regarding the limited entertainment and the regulation of an existing off-premise advertising signs and billboards near regional sporting facilities. Item 4 is the approval of a drainage and utility easement vacation application submitted by Leonard Multifamily Communities for the property at 120 5th Street Northeast. And number 5 is an alley vacation application submitted by Project for Pride in Living. After speaking with the staff, it appears this project is not ready to move forward, so we'll make a motion to delete this item from the agenda. Item 6 is the approval of the rezoning application submitted by Yellow Tree Corp. to rezone a property at 2323 Jackson Street Northeast from an R4 multifamily district to an R5 multifamily district to construct a new 4-story, 65-unit residential building. Are there any questions or comments by community members on any of these items? Councilmember Reich.
Mr. Chair, I'd hope to move the consent item -6. I have some brief comments to make regarding 6.
Thank you. With that, I will move items 2 through 4 as listed on the agenda, and I also move to delete item 5 from the agenda, and we'll pull off item 6. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Why don't we would you like to address item 6 right away? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be moving this without recommendation, and the purpose of that is that there's been significant movement on some key issues between the Community Association and the proposed development. Most significantly, some progress is made in terms of site water management, and in the next week we should be able to finalize that and memorialize that activity, which I think will be to the satisfaction of all parties, and I've discussed this with the developer and all other parties. So I move to move without recommendation, subject to the activities and formalizations that I just mentioned.
Thank you. Councilmember Reich's motion is before this on number 6. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Well, now, with that, we're going to move on to the quasi-judicial hearing portion of the agenda. Item 1 is the consideration of an appeal submitted by Lisa Gage on behalf of Carvana regarding the decision of the City Planning Commission condition to approval 8 to a site plan review approving a motor freight terminal located at 1300 New Brighton Boulevard. We'll begin with the staff presentation.
Good morning. The subject property is located at 1300 New Brighton Boulevard. The site is presently zoned I1, which is the light industrial district. In order for the proposed use as the motor vehicle terminal to be permitted on the site, they would have to rezone the property from I1 to I2, which is later on today's agenda. On July 30th, the City Planning Commission adopted the 7 conditions of approval as recommended by staff and added an 8th condition. And it reads, the applicant shall work with CPED staff and Park Board staff to maximize the number of trees on the site up to the proportional amount required for the entire site area. So here's a copy of the site plan that indicates the leasehold area for Carvana. They would be parking vehicles here. They would retain the existing structures here. There's additional parking here, and then sufficient room to maneuver the large vehicles that will be transporting the motor vehicles to the site. The site has well-documented contamination issues. The applicant can speak to work that has happened since the Planning Commission on July 30th as it relates to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And so this condition of approval would require approximately 33 additional trees. The Planning Commission was not specific to say that those 33 trees would be located within the leasehold area, but somewhere on the property as a whole. The applicant has appealed this condition of approval and is asking for consideration to alleviate or eliminate that condition of approval in the site plan review application. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council members? Oh, seeing none. Thanks. At this point, we'll open the hearing, and I'll first give the applicant an opportunity to address. If you could say your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Chair Schrader. Council members, my name is Jacob Steen with Larkin Hoffman Attorneys. Address is 8300 Norman Center Drive. We represent Carvana LLC, the applicant. Staff has done a good job of summarizing the issues, and I'm sure you've reviewed the staff report. This is a unique site, to say the least. Historically, it was a quarry, part of a much larger quarry that was subsequently landfilled and then capped. A large portion of the quarry has been remediated to the north, in particular associated with the Interstate 94 project as well as the quarry development. However, the soil borings on this site indicate that it's still a capped landfill. And the debris, the subsurface debris documented, is anywhere from 1 to 2 feet to 10 feet below the surface, and it includes construction debris, concrete, metal, glass, plastic, anything you'd find in a demolition landfill. In addition, there are also significant amounts of petroleum vapors on site, which is why historically the site has been in the condition it is. It's currently enlisted in the MPCA's petroleum brownfield program, and there's ongoing investigation into the subsurface contaminants. And in order to, we have engaged the PCA on discussions about what we can do and where we can do it, but in order to even have a substantive conversation, we would first need to do some additional exploratory analysis in the form of a phase 2 environmental assessment, which is about an $8,000 to $10,000 investigation. So for these reasons, Carvana has sought to really minimize the impacts to the soil. Historically, this property had a variance to the surfacing requirements for these exact same reasons. However, this condition requires between 33 and 38 trees, canopy trees. And these aren't little trees. They're not the 1-inch caliper trees. They're 2.5-inch caliper trees that would require for each tree approximately a little over 2 cubic yards of soils to be disturbed. And when you have a site of this level of contamination, those soils have to be removed. We can't just move them elsewhere on the site. We've got to remove them and dispose of them in a landfill as well. And our calculations have would require over 2,400 cubic feet of soil removed just to meet this tree requirement. Now, we don't think that those trees are going to necessarily thrive or even live in these soils because it's subsurface debris. And what we're looking at is approximately 8 to 10 dump trucks worth of soil that would just have to be removed so that we could put these things in the ground. Now, there is a portion of the site, which you can see along New Brighton Boulevard, where we are going to be planting about 30 to 35 trees or shrubs. They're going to be arborvitae. They're going to be along the fence line to meet the screening requirement. So we are going to try to maximize what we can put in there. And we can do it there because that's former right-of-way. So that's not actually part of the old dump. So we can put those in, but we really can't do much else in that area because that's where all of the stormwater treatment is and the subsurface utilities as well as overhead utilities, which preclude the planting of trees. So we're trying to do everything that we can on the site without disturbing it, which would create significant liability and risk for this site. And again, we don't control the entire site. It's only about a third of the property. So what we're seeking to do is get approval of the site plan as recommended by staff with alternative compliance to the tree requirement. And we're specifically asking the committee to approve our appeal request and remove condition number 8. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I've also got Ryan Phipps with Kimley Horn, our engineer, and Christian Orr from Carvana.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, or I have a couple? You talked about alternative compliance. Could you get more specific about that?
Sure. As a site plan, it's a site plan review requirement, or the manner in which, through the site plan review process, the city can grant relief to these requirements. And staff did recommend alternative compliance with respect to landscaping and tree requirements in the staff report and at Planning Commission. But effectively, by adding this condition, even though I suppose they've adopted the alternative compliance, they've negated the alternative compliance by putting that requirement back in as a condition of approval.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other discussion among council members? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now open the hearing to the public. Please limit comments to 2 minutes per person, and which will be tracked on the timer by the clerk. Would any members of the public here to speak? Is anyone here to speak? Anybody here? Seeing no one, the hearing is now closed. And now we'll open it up for discussion and motions. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm inclined to move that we deny the appeal and adopt the conditions as submitted by staff, including the one that's contended today. I understand and appreciate that this is a challenged site, and that would, challenge the implementation of what we would require of almost any other site. But those challenges aren't our problem. It's the problem of the development. And I don't think it's a good precedent to say, okay, we're going to sort of slough on our goals because it's a challenged site. These challenged sites should actually be remediated. I mean, this is a blight on the community in its current condition. And anything that we can chip away in its blighted condition is what we should be encouraging, not passing it over and saying, oh, it's super polluted, so we don't want to have the typical amenities applied to it. So with that reasoning, I'm willing to move as stated, denial.
Councilmember Ellison.
I would like to support Councilmember Reich's motion. I think that, if we're going to be serious about environmental justice and cleaning up environmental impacts in the city, we shouldn't be looking to kind of mask some of these soils that were contaminated over time, but yeah, to remediate them. So I just wanted to affirm that and thank Councilmember Reich for his motion.
Oh, well, seeing no others, I'd kind of like to add my comments. I wholeheartedly agree with what both council members have said, and that reflects what the Planning Commission had talked about as well, just that we have these goals. And when I was hoping for if the appeal was for alternative compliance, to find some other way to do that, because we certainly understand the cost that is going to be to the developer. But I agree with what the council members have said. And with that, Councilmember Reich's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Our final item, number 7, is the approval of an application submitted by Larkin Hoffman Attorneys to rezone the property at 1300 New Brighton Boulevard from an I-1 light industrial district to an I-2 medium industrial district to establish a motor freight terminal on the existing property.
Thank you. So as I previously mentioned, this will be the other item for discussion. So the legislative decision before you today is the rezoning to rezone 1300 New Brighton Boulevard from the light industrial district I-1 to the medium industrial district I-2. Staff has stated findings in the original staff report starting on pages 3 through 4. In order to approve a rezoning, we have to find that the proposed rezoning is consistent with our comprehensive plan and any small area plans. In this case, the only additional plan that is relevant is the industrial land use and employment plan. So staff has stated policies under finding 1 that is on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report. The rezoning was recommended for approval by the City Planning Commission and is now before you today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify any of the findings.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
I would actually then understand that Councilmember Reich has an emotional to kind of speak to this item, so I'll defer to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I will be moving and encouraging my colleagues to support me in denying the upzoning. Several reasons, but I will state a couple. One, we can very easily satisfy our employment goals with the existing zoning, and so it's a legislative act to have an incentive on our end why we would be guided to upzone. Furthermore, we typically have a policy of sort of a concentric circle, if you will, of radiating uses, with I2, I3 being our strongest, buffer zones, transition commercial, high density, typically residential at that point, and then into our medium zoned areas. And so this would go against that sort of dominant pattern. Furthermore, I would suggest that with the existing zoning, again, we could achieve our employment goals, and with the existing proposal, I don't think it gives us any real incentive in terms of job creation, particularly as it pertains to jobs per density of square footage. So with that sensibility, I move to deny the upzoning and let it remain I1.
Thank you. Are there any further discussion? Council President Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to voice support and thank Councilmember Reich for just really being a consistent voice in the council, for reminding us how important it is not to slowly chip away at industrial land. And, right now we're having a conversation about future policy, but our current policy says that we really care about preserving land for industrial uses, or whatever word you want to use to describe uses that create jobs and are a really important part of our local economy. And so particularly at this time when we're looking at updating our policies, I think it's important that we not make one-on-one decisions, and that could really, in the end, I think a lot of cities have been left with very little land that's set aside for this kind of use. And as our economy evolves and as industrial evolves to be really different, we are looking at our policies, what's more, prevalent in today's economy in terms of maker spaces and the kinds of things that are constructed and built and stored in cities. But all of that still goes back to the basic underlying notion that we have set aside land for these purposes, and slowly chipping away at them will leave us with nothing if we let that happen. So thank you.
Councilmember Reich.
I appreciate the comments of President Bender, and I also appreciate the reminder. We are in the middle of updating our comp plan. It's a significant project that's coming to a head, and I think that should be a significant step in our decision today.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments?
Mr. Chair, just real quick, I would just suggest that the motion should be paired with the staff direction to draft findings in support of the motion should it be successful.
Okay. With that, Councilmember Reich's motion is before this, paired with staff direction and findings. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. And with that, we have no further business before us at this time, and we are adjourned.